Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the SMPTE New England section. This is our May meeting. We're going to have actually two more coming, and watch your email for that information. I think you'll be tickled pink to see what we have coming up. I want to thank Paul Beck for really making everything possible here. We could not run the section without Paul. So how about a round of applause for Paul? Our special guest tonight is going to be going over the things that interested him most about NAB. Just came back from NAB, but this is no ordinary guest. Our guest tonight is Mark Schubin. Mark has got more Emmy Awards than I have Carter's Little Liver Pills, if you can remember that far back. The original director of Sesame Street and the current technical director of the Metropolitan Opera, and probably a million other things that I've even forgot or, don't know. He can tell you, so why don't you ask him? But I am just thrilled to find out what he thinks of what went on at NAB. If you saw our meeting notice, you'll see there's all kinds of things on there, different compression formats and 5G and lots of other stuff. So I'm going to turn this whole thing over to Mark, and he will entertain you for at least the next hour or so. So here you go. Mark Schubin.
I've been going to NAB for a long time, and this NAB, called the 100th NAB, was actually 100 years since the first, but they had 2 years that they didn't have shows. But they gave out ribbons for how many NABs you've attended, and it went up to 25 years, so they gave me two 25-year ones because this was my 51st year. So my first NAB was in 1973, and everyone wore jackets and ties, and it was mostly engineers in the exhibit halls. And this is some stuff from the 1973 NAB show. Because it was the year after a presidential election, it was in Washington, and that's what they always did back then. Took 3 hotels. The biggest exhibitors were RCA and Ampex, neither of whom exhibits at NAB anymore. Cameras used imaging tubes, and if they were color cameras, they needed registration, and so there were registration charts, which people don't know what those are anymore. Broadcast dominated. There was equipment for transferring film, and there were innovations. The BBC unveiled their teletext system there. IBC had a 12-hour cart machine. There was a only 38-pound backpack VTR, and an 11-pound camera with an 11-pound backpack. And there was PCP-90 LLL for low light level that had image intensifiers in front of each tube, and lenses had gotten up to 30-to-1, 34 even in a dual lens. And there were the first digital systems, digital transmission system from ComSat and digital TBC from CBS, not the drugstore, but Consolidated Video Systems. And so BME, which was a magazine back then, said, someday the analog signal may disappear, and it did. And so here we are at the 2023 NAB show, and thanks to Paul and his associates, we have tube cameras, and they're color cameras, and so they need registration, and there's that registration chart surrounded in red. And at the 2023 NAB show, wasn't just that broadcast didn't dominate, they had to provide a broadcast district so anyone could find anything about broadcast. There's still film at the show, however, and not only this Dutch company, Film Fabriek, but also ARRI, Blackmagic, Digital Film Technology, Film Light, Laser Graphics, and a new company called Filmic Technologies, which was founded by Jim Lindner. Some of you may know Jim Lindner. There's a SMPTE Prize named for him. He was the founder of SAMA, which was created to transfer analog tape to digital. There's lots of film out there, but there's not a lot of film technicians. So his idea was to come up with a film scanner that your grandmother could operate. And it doesn't matter if you put the film in backwards or upside down or inside out, it'll work. It doesn't matter if it's magnetic or optical sound. And you would think, well, if it's magnetic sound and you have the film backwards, that's going to be a problem. Nope. He's got a head that is sensitive enough that it can pick up the magnetic information from the other side of the film. And he's got multispectral light coming so that it can eliminate some of the scratches and things like that. The crowds are back at NAB 2023, but there were more food trucks than outdoor exhibits. And so I came up with a theme for NAB, which I call hyper reality. And maybe you think I spelled that wrong. It's hype or reality. Here we have a flag that I believe is a Mandalorian flag. And why the Mandalorian? Well, they were the people who first came up with virtual production. And that was in 2018. So here is last year's NAB, and they had a virtual production Unreal ride in the lobby, and huge line of people waiting to sit on the motorcycle and take this Unreal virtual production ride. Well, here we are in 2023, same ride, same lobby, no lines and no people looking at it because, you know, it's become regular. It's not that it's old hat or that there's nothing important about virtual production, quite the opposite. But because it's now regular, it's stuff that people look at to get some real stuff out of. And so here's reality in virtual production. There's a virtual production truck, and they use this in Europe to go around to various racetracks, and that's why they have the ramps so they can roll a race car into the truck and do a virtual production shot of a race car on the Formula One circuit or whatever. SMPTE has a new system called RIS, or Rapid Industry Solutions, because things are changing so fast that there really isn't time sometimes for regular standardization. So all of these organizations are involved in the SMPTE RIS for virtual production. You can take notes if you want, but all these slides are already available online, and there'll be a QR code on the last slide that you can get it from. This was interesting in virtual production, a company called Zero Density, and they have camera tracking, but you don't need to wear anything special. You don't need any white dots. You don't need anything like that. It just figures out where you are. And so you can do things in front of an LED screen, like the person that you see on the side in front of the basketball arena, or you can do green screen and shadows come out where they're supposed to come out, and people can walk in and out of graphics. If you go to that YouTube link there, it's a very interesting little 30-second demo. Here's another company, Aximetry, and they have something called a 3D clean plate. When you're shooting green screen, you have to be very careful with the lighting, and if there's any smudges, you can have problems. Well, they shoot the green screen itself from different angles and create a clean plate in their system so that the green screen is perfect no matter what's going on in front of it. And one of the interesting things about both of those companies, Zero Density is based in Turkey, and Aximetry is based in Budapest, Hungary. And this was the smallest virtual production system at the show, a company called Skyglass, and they take advantage of the sensors that are in an iPhone. And so as you move things around, it's like using a camera control platform because they're taking the sensor information. And so you can do 3D Unreal Engine type effects. And this is what you have to pay for it. $4.99 a month for the lowest one, or if you want to go full blast, it's $24.99 a month. So the theme that NAB had was welcome to what's next. Well, what's next? This is a very large exit sign. You have no idea how big this exit sign is. I could sleep on a bed the size of this exit sign and have room for all of my friends to join me in the bed. But what's under the exit sign is a solid cinder block wall. So maybe what's next is they're going to put an exit in there. This is why we have trust issues. But speaking of non-stick, one of the things at this show, and it just seemed to be the 2023 NAB show, the booth labels didn't stick. And so people were walking around with booth labels on the soles of their feet. And people looking for booth numbers couldn't figure out where they were. This was another sign at NAB in the West Hall. But there were important gender things. For one thing, no scantily clad women on camera sets anymore. And a lot of musicians jamming, which is great because they can do that all day and they're perfectly happy to be there. And TV News Check's Women in Technology Awards had lots of men in the room, not just women in the room. So that was kind of nice to see. But we still have spokesmagicians. So maybe no spokesmodels, but spokesmagicians are important. And the NAB show announced the winners of the Product of the Year award. Well, I would think Product of the Year would be a product. There were 150 products that were awarded the Product of the Year. There were only 1,208 exhibitors. So you had like a 1 in 8 chance of winning one of the NAB awards. But if you didn't win one of the NAB awards, well, TV Technology gave out 59 awards for Best of Show. And the same publisher gave out more awards with its other publications, and there were other media, and the International Association of Broadcast Manufacturers also gave out their awards, so lots and lots of awards. And NAB this year had a new category of award, the Excellence in Sustainability Awards, and that was another 9 awards plus 6 honorable mentions. But Excellence in Sustainability, you fly to Las Vegas so you can look at software. This is a sustainable thing. They had more than 65,000 attendees, so down low from what it used to be in the old days, but up 20% from last year. And 17,000, more than 17,000 from outside the US, so people who did fly a lot to get there. So we're saying we can do remote production in the cloud, but we have to go to NAB to see stuff. And this is an article by Chris Chinnock, one of 3 of his reports on NAB. And he said, oh, I didn't actually attend NAB, but here's what I know. And it's perfectly fine because you do know lots of stuff about what was there without having to go. Now, maybe you do have to go, or at least not do things online. I was looking for something in the Central Hall. And so I clicked on the Central Hall. It immediately says Central Hall. And then I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I never got to find what I was looking for. So I just opened up the guide and there's the Central Hall map and I found it right away. So paper still has importance. And one of the exhibitors was giving out as its goodies a paper notebook. There were some software-only innovations, though, and so Telestream Lightspeed has been a terrific thing. It's a way of transmitting information and being able to edit it immediately. You don't have to wait until the file closes, and now they have a software-only version of that. But there was lots of hype at the show. Now, some of it was low-level hype, like these people, oh yeah, we have cameras, any speed, any resolution, any cable length. Well, they mean any normally discussed resolution, any normally discussed speed. If I say I want 10 trillion frames per second at 100 trillion pixels per line, they're probably not going to be able to deliver. And then here's Prime Focus Technologies, really great stuff. Lots of AI working there, but automatically convert horizontal videos into square and vertical formats. Here's a frame from the movie The War of the Roses. What's the AI going to do in this case? Shrink it down to a little tiny thing, or show us one person, or maybe just show us the empty chairs in the middle of the frame? And here's another company that was exhibiting at NAB, and they said they had a holographic LED screen. Well, no, they had a transparent LED screen, and it was impressive, but there was nothing holographic about it. And then we have ATSC3. And I just don't understand this. They keep talking about things that are total BS, like that it has two-way interactivity. Now, in fairness, this was not a problem for this publication. I eliminated the last line there. They say it has two-way interactivity when working in tandem with broadband. But if it's broadband, why do we need ATSC 3.0? Now, there used to be some interactivity in even analog television. This was ACTV, a system that came out in the late 80s. This is a patent for the system. It could allow interactivity with graphics, interactivity with a few cable channels or some audio. And then this is something that Zenith broadcast starting in 1951, and it required a return channel, and the return channel was a telephone line. And a telephone line has much less bandwidth than television, and so that made sense. But here is my T-Mobile 5G modem, and if I'm getting 242 megabits, am I even going to notice if ATSC 3 gives me another 10, if it could give me 10? No, I'm not going to notice that. So once you have the broadband, why do you need the ATSC 3 for the interactivity? So truth will out. And 5G will only get better. But at the moment, 5G is not necessarily that great. So I showed you my T-Mobile 5G modem. That's not the kind of number I get 100% of the time. If you look down at the bottom, T-Mobile seems to be doing better than the other carriers, but it's available only 49.7% of the time, and this was earlier this year. So Teradek says, hey, if you really have mission critical stuff, you should use all the carriers. Don't pick just one. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, Teradek is now in the business of selling you SIM cards, and the Teradek SIM card will use whatever carriers are around, including carriers in other countries. So that was an interesting innovation at NAB. This was also interesting, the ability to do ATSC 3 and 5G in the same spectrum. And so that's kind of good. You're not taking one away from the other. Yes?
About using the three carriers together. The cop show initially did that. Didn't they, when they did the live TV, use all three carriers?
The question was, did someone do three carriers originally? I'm sorry, who was it?
The television show, live TV, cops show.
Oh, the show Cops might have used three carriers.
One of the producers, but they had three different units on the car so that they never lost the signal. I just added that, sorry.
In case you out there didn't hear that, he's saying that on the show Cops, they used three different carriers so that they never lost the signal. This is a group that won the Innovation and Technology Award for NAB. And it's a system basically for providing a data dump for first responders. And it's a wonderful system. I have no complaints about it. It's good in every sense of the word. It's a well-engineered system. It does good for humanity. It tells people what they need to know. Great results. There is nothing special about ATSC 3 that made this possible. And how do I know there's nothing special about ATSC 3? Because this is what was transmitted over broadcast radio in 1948 on a subcarrier. This was one of 4 facsimile editions of the New York Times that was transmitted every day on WQXR. Sorry? On subcarrier, yeah. So it didn't even interfere with the music that the station was carrying. But ATSC 3 is a wonderful transmission system, and it's the most sustainable TV delivery system. So people should be trumpeting that, and they are not. They're instead talking about two-way interactivity and accessibility, and all this stuff has been available in previous systems. On the left, you see the companies that are involved in ATSC 3. On the right, you see a bunch of people in the ATSC booth. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think possibly if you added the number of companies on the left picture to the number of people on the right picture, you might have more than the current people who are actually receiving ATSC 3 signals. And that sustainability lead is not going to last forever. So here we have a consortium that's working on making 5G more energy efficient. And people are using antennas, and it's more of them, and it's younger people who are using antennas. So it's a great system, promoted as a great broadcast system. Don't do BS about it. A little more about broadcast. Here are Super Bowl ratings, and this year's Super Bowl, the third most watched TV program ever. The first two were other Super Bowls. But look down at the bottom, and that's streaming. And they say streaming is 18% up from last year. So it gets to an average of 7 million versus 113 million who are watching the broadcast feed. Something to think about. And here is a story about ATSC3, and the people who wrote this story say, sorry, but this story looks a lot like last year's or maybe even the year before. Again, a superb broadcast transmission system. So at this year's NAB, there were senators who said, hey, we got to do something about ATSC3. And so the FCC said, oh, yes, we're going to do something, and it's going to be a public-private partnership. And we don't really know anything beyond that at the moment. Another form of transmission is the cloud. The cloud basically means somebody else's computer. And so here's a new company, Manifold, and they're saying, no, it doesn't have to be somebody else's computer. It can be your computer. So this is basically a do-it-yourself cloud.
So that brings up a different question though, because when I went around NAB, cloud was like, I don't know really what cloud is. Well, do you or don't you? We're planning.
Okay, we have a Zoom meeting, so we need to get your questions on the mic.
Okay, so everybody talks about
Switch
cloud.
up.
Everybody talks about cloud, and it's like, what is cloud? Okay, so you ask one guy one thing, he gets a different answer. Same thing over here. You just said it. It could be your own personal computer.
Yeah.
It really can be.
What these people are doing is they're saying, if you have more than one computer, like you have a bunch of edit suites, or you have a bunch of servers, and they're not all working full blast all the time, then their cloud system will enable you to use the additional processing power that you have in those other computers to help you do things. So yeah, a private cloud that lets you leverage things that you have already. Atomos had this Shogun Studio 2. Those of you who've been following Shogun, 2 years ago, they had the Shogun 7, and it would record 4 signals. Last year, because of cloud or connectivity or whatever, they said, oh, it's important that we have Shogun Connect, and it'll immediately transmit things, but it has only 1 signal. Well, this version now will record 8 signals simultaneously, and it has an 8-second cache. So if you're just sitting there and something cool happens and, oh, did we record that? No, we'll hit record now. And it records what happened 8 seconds ago. So that's kind of cool. This was the smallest booth at NAB. This was for a company called Yellow Umbrella. They're actually a well-liked company in Europe. They deal with translation stuff, speech to text and subtitles and things like that. And they're using AI. And so we get to AI. There were lots and lots and lots of AI things at NAB. Some of them are what I call no problem. So Atelier had deep analysis for storage. It looks at what you're storing, it sees if you have anything duplicated, and it doesn't store that. And so they say you can save maybe 90% of your storage by using that system. MediaKind was using AI for encoding and upscaling. The Super Bowl, by the way, on Fox was upscaled to 4K, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Aquila is using AI to reduce energy requirements. VizRT is using AI for keying. All of that is great stuff, no problem. Then we have the category that I call maybe supervised. So Adobe Premiere Pro, doing transcripts and text-based editing, but maybe it misses something. And then you go into the edit suite and you don't know where that is. So maybe a little supervision. EVS is doing extra motion. This is you shoot at normal frame rates, but you can do slow-mo and it fills in all the additional frames. Maybe you want to keep an eye on that too.
So I can expand on that.
We need the microphone whenever you're talking.
I need the microphone. Just expanding on EVS's extra motion a bit. This is actual AI technology.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of strange because in my Grass Valley days, we always thought of X or I and B and P frames. Okay, so EVS has always been iframe based. And now they're kind of going at the B and the P frames and really extrapolating those and adding those in with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually very cool what they're doing. I mean, you got to be careful in certain applications that you don't do that, but in most applications, you're adding stuff into the image. So if you look at some of the NASCAR stuff that they have, it's pretty darn impressive. When you see in all of these extra frames coming in, this car is not just spinning around and whatever. You can actually feel the motions of everything that is going on in that car crash.
Yeah.
Just saying.
When it works great, it works great.
When it
And-
works great. Yes.
And when it doesn't work great, maybe it's something you want to supervise. And then we have the category that I call caution. And I won't get into the ethics, that's for you to decide. But there's possible errors and there's infringement. And NHK Enterprises had something, they were handing out these drink holders with Kiki on them. Kiki is an artificial person who does sign language interpretation. That works great, fantastic. That doesn't work great, maybe Kiki is cursing at somebody and you don't know it. Veritone was using generative AI and they're saying they use that for talent acquisition. Well, did somebody not get the part because the AI had a hiccup, or did they not get the part because they weren't appropriate for it? Now I mentioned that AI is being used for upscaling and that Fox shot the Super Bowl in HD and upscaled it to 4K again. And here's a story in Consumer Reports, and it says that if you're streaming 4K HDR, then maybe you need 18 to 25 megabits per second, but maybe you don't have that. And there's TV sets that are using AI, and they're doing upscaling in the TV set, and possibly just as good as what Fox was doing. And this is 2019, and there's now multiple manufacturers that are doing that. So IMAX had its first NAB exhibit this year, and it was for a division they have called SimWave, and SimWave looks at quality of streams. And here is one of the Super Bowl streams, one moment of one of the Super Bowl streams. And they say the overall score quality was between 73 and 83 out of 100. This particular one is 48. And you can see it's not a great picture. And here are two different streams. There are different vertical scales, so they're not quite the same, but the one on the bottom is varying in quality quite a bit, but not really going that low. Looks like the lowest is maybe around 68 or something. And the top one is not doing very much variation and is generally very good, but at one point went down to like that 48 that you just saw. Why should we convert to 4K at the transmit end and require more bits to get to the home rather than converting to 4K at the home end using the same AI type conversion, assuming that we can use the same AI type conversion? Now, I flunked the Turing test. I was doing a project where I wanted to find women who were involved in pioneering television technology. And so I got on ChatGPT and I said, can you name women involved in pioneering television engineering research? And it came up with 4 names, and 3 of them didn't seem to have anything to do with television. But that second one, Marion Edwards, that looked really terrific. Wow, I hadn't heard about her. And so I said, can you tell me more? And so it tells me, and it's fantastic. I believed every single line of this until I started looking into it, and not a word of it was true. And so you'll notice up at the top next to the Chat GPT, it says, this is 1 of 7. I said, okay, regenerate. And it went from her working at RCA on color television to her working at CBS on some television recording system. And I said, regenerate. And this time she was working at Dumont on something. And now it got the names maybe from this person who worked in animations in our business, or maybe from this person who worked in international TV. So I contacted a friend of mine who works in AI and told him what I did. And he said, oh, no, you can't do search on AI. That's no good. But, feed in some article that you wrote or something and ask it to summarize. So okay. So I fed in my resume and I said, can you summarize my resume? And the reason I have this Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame is it said, I am a member of the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame. So I said, regenerate, and it came up with other stuff. And this time it was like 99% accurate, both of them. But each time it said, I was a member of the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame. I am not. Here is, sorry.
Just, I was thinking of one woman who was outstanding and did design in I think the original ATSC. You might know her, Barbara Roeder.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she could be included in that list. Yeah.
Eddie Lamar.
Eddie Lamar, not really television,
Well,
but
no, I mean, radio signal.
yeah. So that's the error part of AI. And now we get to the infringement part of AI. So Google Bard is now incorporating Adobe Firefly. So somebody says, make an image of a unicorn for my kid's birthday party. And this is what Adobe Firefly does. And it's a terrific image of a unicorn, and it's just perfect for a kid. Except, look at that unicorn. It's got pink hooves and blue above it, and it's got kind of blue, gold, and pink hair. Where did the AI system come up with that? It must have looked someplace for it. In ChatGPT, the P stands for pre-training. And what do these AI systems pre-train on? So Getty Images is suing Stable Diffusion for copyright infringement. And how do they know that they infringed the copyright? Well, on the left is a Getty Images image. And because it's not bought yet, it has their logo on it saying Getty Images. Well, the AI system figures, oh, if I want an image like that, I should probably have something like the Getty logo. And so the AI put the Getty logo in. So we know very well where that image came from. And so they got quite a lawsuit there. The Supreme Court just ruled against the Andy Warhol estate in a copyright case. Now, up at the top right, I'm showing what Andy Warhol did. This is based on a photograph, but it's obviously not a photograph. That's something special that he did, and yet the Supreme Court said, nope, that infringes on that photograph. Universal didn't even have to do a suit. People came up with an AI song based on Drake and The Weeknd, and Universal just said, take that down, and everyone took it down. So if you do something using generative AI, is somebody going to come to you and say, take it down, or give me $1 million, or something like that? It's a question. And this has nothing to do with AI, but I just thought, since we're talking about our robot overlords, it's nice that BBC is replacing their robot cameras so they don't have the fails that they had.
What are
Okay.
they replacing
With manual cameras.
them? Okay.
Blackmagic Design now has SMPTE-ST 2110 gear. And this is very exciting. Blackmagic has very low-cost equipment, but they don't have a lot of 2110 gear. This is their booth, and inside the red circle is those two 2110s. The rest of it is SDI. And here are some new Blackmagic SDI products. And that one down at the bottom is a 40 by 40 router. So if I were doing a big new facility, I would absolutely use IP technology. But if I were doing a smaller facility, it's an awful lot cheaper not to use IP technology.
It's a heck of a lot cheaper.
Yep.
There's no question, SDI.
Yep.
Even 12 gig SDI is cheap.
And at NAB, there were a bunch of 2110 products. Here are two cameras that are 2110, but they also have SDI outputs on both of those cameras. And now, in addition to 2110 and everything that we've had before, Dante, which was known previously as an audio transmission system, they have AV, and so they're transmitting video, and it's not just one Dante, but it's two Dantes. Whoops, sorry. So there's AV Ultra and AVH, one that's a higher version and one that's a lower version.
So, I'm sorry, Mark, all of those companies that were there, are they part of the Dante AV?
Yes, all of those companies are using Dante AV.
Okay. Interesting.
And there were also many other companies that aren't listed here, just small companies, and they had Dante AV signs in their booth. And then NDI, which has been around for a while, they have a new version, NDI HX3. So yet another way of transmitting things digitally. This was another innovation at the show. Rotolight has a smart softbox. You can electronically alter the diffusion on the soft light. So it can be up on the grid and you just turn a knob and it changes how much diffusion on the soft light. Interesting, not that new a technology, but this was a previously introduced one that is even more exciting. It's an electronically variable ND filter that's available in some Sony cameras. ARRI now has an ARRI Live because people like to have the large format cameras for live shows, Super Bowl halftime, for example. And so they have tally systems and a live CCU, or they call it a CCP. But live can be hard. This is on the eve of NAB, and Netflix, one of the largest streaming companies, tried to do a live show and couldn't. And it wasn't just Netflix. Here is YouTube more recently doing an NBA playoff game and instead was repeating a Little Mermaid ad. So Grass Valley says we love live, but they need to help people. Speaking of the large format cameras, this is a new Fujinon lens, and it's for a large format camera, not a small format camera. And so it's a 40:1 zoom range. So they've gotten the zooms for large format cameras about where the zooms for smaller format cameras were in 1973. Vertical video, big thing now. And so this is a vertical video PTZ camera from YOLO Live. And Blackmagic also has software for turning their Pocket Cinema cameras into vertical aspect ratio cameras. Astro Design had an 8K camera that operates at 240 frames per second, which sounds like a lot, except that here is a video game that'll run at 600 frames per second, assuming you have anything you can watch it on at 600 frames per second. So this is me in 1973 with low light level shooting. Thanks. And that's a Bosch Fernzi KCU 40, which had bias light, which was a new thing at the time. A CEI 270 that had secondary electron conduction tubes that could really see in the dark, and then new at NAB 1973, the Philips PCP-90 LLL with image intensifiers in front of each tube. So let's talk about the evolution of image intensifiers. Generation 1, about 1,000 times amplification. Generation 2, about 20,000 times amplification, but the light in the house is a problem. It's kind of bleeding all over the place. Generation 3, a little more amplification, but much more control over the light that's in the house there. Well, Canon has a new type of sensor. They call it a SPAD sensor. SPAD stands for Single Photon Avalanche Detector. And on the left is a CMOS sensor, and they say you get 1-to-1 multiplication from the CMOS sensor, but the SPAD sensor gives you 1,000,000-to-1 multiplication of the single photon coming in and getting multiplied. And therefore, this camera was shown at NAB, the MS500, and it's got a B4 mount, so it'll use regular broadcast lenses, and it can operate at even 0.007 lux, which is lower than night sky that's cloudy with no starlight. So sounds very impressive, and this is that new SPAD sensor. Except that in 2015 at NAB, Canon introduced this with a CMOS sensor, and it said it'll operate at 0.0005 lux, which is 14 times lower than the new camera. And it's a CMOS sensor. This was a microphone from Audio-Technica on the left for immersive pickup. And on the right, we have one from Dotterel with 80 microphone elements. And what can you do with 80 microphone elements? Well, what happens if you have a drone? That's a conventional mic.
What I was
Speaker
just
on
going
the
to
drone.
say, might have been a call for help. It
Same
might have
drone
been
picking it
strict
up.
instructions. It could have even been a threat. Up until now, there's been no way to tell because all UAVs are deaf to what is happening around them. At Dotterel, we've developed aerial audio, the world's first two-way audio communication payload.
So they're saying you can now do interviews by drone. I don't know, 50 feet, something like that. There was 3D at Sony. At the left is a volumetric capture cage. Someone stands on the bottom and rotates and gets captured by all the cameras. And then they've had a spatial reality display, which is a no glasses 3D display, but it's now up to 27 inches. And some people thought that was extremely impressive, but it wasn't the only no glasses 3D display at NAB. Asus had a booth and they have it in this laptop. You can have no glasses 3D. This was a more interesting to me monitor that Sony had, the BVM HX3110, and it's their HDR monitor. And so first interesting thing is it's a 4000 nit monitor, except notice that there's an asterisk by the peak luminance, and it says, you know, it's not guaranteed, and the auto brightness limiter may work under certain conditions. This is a problem with that monitor, and it's not Sony's fault. This is a problem with people watching things in a coloring suite where the lights are out and you've got an HDR monitor and you say, that's great. But then people are not watching at home. And so HBO defends this as an intentional creative decision. Yeah, it was an intentional creative decision made in a grading suite, not made in front of somebody's home TV. This was NAB 2016, and this was a company called ISO Video, and I actually spoke to you up here about this when I did a talk on HDR. And basically, this is a spatial high-pass filter. This is not even AI or anything in 2016, and it's giving you HDR, but you can make out everything thanks to using perceptual changes. This was another thing about the Sony monitor. They have a fast response mode, so you can see things that normally you wouldn't be able to see on an LCD monitor, but you have to pay for the license for that. So you buy the monitor and then you pay for the license so that you can see the fast stuff. And last thing on that monitor, the viewing angle, it's an 89-degree viewing angle to a 10-to-1 contrast ratio, which sounds great, and it certainly is great for any kind of color grading suite. But this is video operators in a truck, and they want to look at each other's monitor to see what's going on. And if you have that 10-to-1 contrast ratio and you're looking at the other guy's monitor, then maybe you're thinking you're doing something wrong. It's not just video that has been having problems at home TVs. Amazon has a much needed feature to boost dialogue in movies and TV shows so we can hear what people are saying. Well, we should be able to hear what people are saying without Amazon having a special AI feature. This company, Alluvio, is got a whole different form of distribution, and they're using blockchain, but they're using sustainable blockchain. So they're using the Ethereum system that is low energy consumption. It's a proof of stake system rather than a proof of work system. And when they do NFTs, the NFTs are integrally related to what the television programming is. It's not like doing NFT like, oh, you know, we could put a parking lot at the transmitter site and we could make money that way. It's not the business that you're in. And there's lots of stuff on the Alluvio website. You can go there and see the kind of stuff that they're doing. And then finally, I have this. I took out the name of the company because there was no need to penalize them, but you might notice that the viewfinder seems to be pointing the wrong way. That's okay. That's the lens for the viewfinder. Sometimes people do take that off, but people don't usually shoot with the lens cap on. So a PDF of these slides is available at bit.ly/SNE, like SMPTE New England -NAB 23, or you can shoot the QR code and that will take you to the slides. And that is my NAB. Any questions? Yes, Marty. Use the mic.
More of a comment. I noticed Sony, for example, makes available a hardware plug-in for the HDC series of cameras. I happen to notice it on the 3100. I was coding it, and it does ST2110 as an option, but it's not software. It's a hardware, actually piece of hardware. But that's interesting that they're starting to dip their toes into the IP world.
Yeah, there's lots of people who have adapters. Riedel has little SFP plugins that'll go from SDI to 2110. So that's been around for a while, but you know, as we've been saying, that costs money.
Did you have a favorite pick of everything you saw that was unique? And
yeah, I kind of like the zero density gear and camera tracker. I thought it was terrific, and it's low cost, maybe low cost because it's based in Turkey. It's used a lot, and it's really well thought out and operationally good, and I didn't have any nits to pick on it, so I was very happy to watch them do their demo.
anyone else have any questions?
I agree on that respect there, Mark. In terms of the zero density thing, that's pretty cool. There's no question. In terms of traditional broadcast stuff, though, versus, let's just say, the next level until we get IP figured out, people that really understand PTP, people that really understand, you know, what's going on with cloud. What's going to happen in the next couple of years? Where are we going to go? Is there still hardware-based products?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So those that might be purporting to say, hey, you know, we're not going to build hardware anymore. We're going to only build, you know, COTS-based stuff. Is that something that we should be looking at, or?
Well, there's some things that you can do with COTS-based stuff, and there's things that you can't do with COTS-based stuff. Here is a transducer, and no amount of software is going to turn my voice into an electrical signal. And this screen that's coming from that projector involves another transducer going in the other direction, and no amount of software is going to make that picture appear on the wall. So yeah, there are interesting things happening in transducers. That dotteral system containing 80 elements, it's using software to adjust those 80 elements so that you can do an interview by drone, but there's 80 elements of microphone in there. So yes, there's a lot of hardware, and that's one of the reasons that we're still going to NAB,
So
because it's not all software.
the reason why I bring it up is because there's a lot of talk on remote production, okay? And cloud-based remote production. What's your take on all of that and what you saw at NAB?
I wouldn't say that I saw anything at NAB this year that made me feel better or worse about remote production. Again, when we're talking remote production, we're not remoting the cameras, we're not remoting the microphones, we're not remoting the people who have to fix the cameras.
Right, all of that stuff has to be on site.
All of that stuff has to
Has
be
to
on
be.
site, and you have to have.
Unless you're
presence.
defying laws of physics, it has to be on site, right?
And
But-
there's other stuff that we can do remotely. Graphics person, I think, is an ideal remote position. There's no reason that a graphics person has to be on site. But director sometimes wants to see what's going on. Did I put the camera in the right place? Would it be better if I have the camera over here? Well, how do I know that if I'm 8,000 miles away? Maybe I need to be on site for that. And the amount of engineering that you have on either side, there are certain trade-offs, certain things, absolutely, you can do it remotely, other things, not so much. I do, Marty mentioned the Metropolitan Opera. I'm the engineer in charge for their media department. And we had a truck EIC come down with COVID. And it was at the beginning of a show. So we got him out of the truck, we put him into a car, and we brought in an intercom panel, and we brought in a monitor, and we brought in a KVM system, and he operated out of the car. Now he could have as easily operated from 200 miles away, except he wouldn't have been able to do the setup that he did earlier.
Other than the fact that he had a monster fever from having.
Well, he tested positive. He didn't actually come down with any symptoms. So no, I didn't see anything at NAB this year that made me feel differently about it than I would have felt 3-4 years ago.
Was there any more interest in 8K for production?
Well, again, the third most watched television show was this year's Super Bowl, which was shot in HD and transmitted as either 4K or 4K, depending on how you want to look at it. AI is pretty good at filling things in. You heard about the EVS filling in extra frames. It can also fill in extra resolution. And do we have to shoot 8K to do that? Do we have to display 8K? I did a different presentation for the HPA Tech Retreat in February, and I had more about 8K in that, including a picture of a woman named Veronica Sider, who was a dentist and who died in, I think it was 2012 or 2013. And she was said to have extraordinary vision, that she could see people's faces at a distance of a mile or something like that. So as best some of us could tell, she was the person that can perceive 8K resolution from a couch. But she's not with us anymore. And for the rest of us, there are probably better things to do.
Let me ask this question. 4K we dealt with. Okay, it's great. As far as I'm concerned, it's great for arenas. Because you can see a screen that far away and you can actually detect the 4K in your eyes. 8K, again, probably will be great for arenas and stadiums, etc. But are you bringing home a 207-inch, 206-inch screen into your house so you can watch 8K from where Marty is sitting to that, not even, about another 10 feet closer. Really, I just don't see it for the home consumer use, albeit those are the manufacturers that are pushing this down the line. So do we really need to produce an 8K? Or should we produce an 8K because that's going to be the master quality and we can downsize that to whatever we need?
How many of you ever got car sick as a kid?
No.
Okay, I see some hands coming out. Looks like almost everyone here. How many of you get car sick today? Okay, one person. The reason those of you who got car sick as a kid don't get car sick today is that you have changed your perception. You have learned perceptual things. So anything we say about 8K today is something that we have not had the experience of perceiving for a while. We can say that we can't see the resolution. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be affected by the MTF. Doesn't mean we're not going to have some other kind of effect. It's something we don't know about because we haven't perceived it. There are experiments that have been done with kittens who are taken from birth and shown only horizontal lines, no vertical lines. And then they're given a piece of glass to traverse a gap. And if it has horizontal lines on it, they'll walk on it. But if it has vertical lines on it, they don't see the vertical lines and they think the gap is there and they won't walk on it. So anything that we say about 8K or 22 channel audio or anything else today is something that we're speculating on based on previous experience. We just don't know.
Okay.
It seems unlikely. It seems something that we shouldn't put a lot of effort into.
Well, we thought HD was unlikely.
Exactly.
Okay. And we thought, all right, NTSC, of course not, but going to SD even sort of was unlikely. I'm asking you from a perspective of your being who you are. Do you really believe that we actually need to have that kind of signal into our homes?
Today, I say no,
Okay.
but
10 years from now, 20
10
years from
I
now,
don't know.
maybe, right? But I don't think people should plan to do that. Whereas you can pull back from that and look more towards HDR.
yeah, are you familiar with the European Union controversy?
Of course. Yeah.
Did you hear about the workaround that Samsung?
No, I haven't.
For those of you not familiar with it, the European Union said that TVs can only consume a certain amount of energy. And an 8K TV consumes more than that amount of energy. And so it looked like that rule was going to preclude the ability to sell 8K TVs in the European community. And what Samsung did was they shipped the TVs with a econo mode that prevents them from presenting enough brightness in 8K to violate the European rule. But it comes with a manual that says you can do this and take away that mode. And apparently that satisfies them because the issue is how it comes out of the box, not how you use it. Yeah.
I mean, 8K might be more viable when the whole wall is a screen. You know, rather than just.
It can only be, the physics of the eye can only let you see 8K from where Marty is actually sitting.
And that technology's got the best of it, yeah. Technology. Just saying.
It is impressive when you walk right up to the screen and you don't see any pixels. But yeah, it's not where you watch. I could see.
But there's
though,
another way to walk up to a screen, even standard definition, and not see any pixels.
Yeah,
Put
that's-
diffusion over it.
I think it could be useful in producing many HD pictures out of the one 8K.
When HD first came out, NHK had a demonstration where they used an HD camera to shoot a background and standard def cameras could be panned around and you'd still have enough of the background being shown. They had an easel system that was connected to the pan head. And they said, this is why you need to go with HD, because it's going to enable you to do this in standard def. I don't know anybody who did that, but we do have HD now.
Could you comment on any of the RIS stuff you saw there?
Well, I can't say that I saw any RIS stuff. What I saw was virtual production stuff. Certainly a lot of virtual production. That Sky Glass is pretty amazing using the iPhone and the sensors in it. Lots of companies doing stuff with virtual production, some doing impressive things, some doing very unimpressive things. There was a car, I won't name the exhibitor, but it was like half of a car that people could sit in, and they had the LED volume behind it, but they didn't have anything else. So none of the lighting matched what was happening behind, and the whole thing looked totally phony. But there's other people who are selling lighting instruments that are specifically designed to give you the appropriate light to match what's happening in the volume behind. So that's important. So a lot of people working on virtual production, doing very, very good stuff. And for certain purposes, virtual production is terrific and a money saver. And it's kind of like the 2110. As I said, you know, if I were designing a big facility, absolutely, I would go 2110. But for a little facility, meh. So same thing, if I'm doing a one-off show, I'm probably not going to do virtual production. If I'm doing something that I think is going to last for 20, 30 episodes and special effects are important, yes, it's great to do virtual production for that. I'm going to save lots of money.
Anyone else?
Anyone online?
That's a good question. Any questions online on chat or otherwise? I want to thank all 400 of you for coming.
I grew up in this three children.
We actually will have a meeting on the RIS in July. That will be the special July meeting with Brian Kobolars.
I'm sorry.
So
This is the closing slide.
I thought you were going to tell us that they figured out a way to shoot through the lens cap. Gamma rays. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, thanks again. Watch your emails for information on upcoming meetings. We're actually 2 meetings ahead for a change. We've got them planned, and then our board, our managers will be meeting on the 11th of July, rather. Yeah, July. I don't even know what day it is, let alone a month, but July 11th. And we'll be planning next season's meetings, which start in September. Now, if you have any ideas for meetings, we'd love to hear them. So, you know, get in touch with myself or Paul Beck with ideas for meetings. We'll add it to our long list. We do an average of 10 meetings a year, so it's a very selective process, but we'd love to do some unusual meetings. And so any ideas at all are appreciated. You can think out of the box. We love that. And but we do an awful lot of in the box meetings. So naturally the manufacturers love that. So, but you know, if you know of any good speakers that have interesting, maybe they've done interesting production things or interesting engineering ideas or whatever, yeah, please get in touch with us. With that, I guess we'll be closing the meeting for tonight. And
Thank you, Mark.
thank you very much, Mark. It's always a pleasure.